Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you a simple practice exercise that you can do to better understand subdivision surface modeling, and it'll help you grow as an artist, okay? It's really simple. All you do is take the default cube and start shaping it out into something a little bit more interesting, okay? So you can bevel some corners, just one bevel, something like this. Maybe extrude it a little, and skew something in. Nothing too crazy. You can try to keep it symmetrical at first, which would help out quite a bit, but you can add some other interesting details, something like so, if you wanted to. So a lot of times when you're working with different shapes, you'll end up with something that should be like this, that's kind of like a cage. And what you can do is you can go through this and make sure your topology is kind of flowing in the directions that you want it to. And you can check it by using face select and holding Alt, clicking around. Okay. And now what you would do is just simply apply a SubD modifier. Okay. Bump up the levels here in the viewport, turn it off in edit mode. We can go to object mode, back to edit mode. Now, we can simply start tightening up our corners, adding some loop cuts here or there, and using any of the tools you need to turn this into a SubD model that behaves how you want it to. Okay. So as you do this little practice exercise, I'll slam that one all the way in the corner, pull it back out. You want to try to get the most even, best topology that you can. All right, nothing too crazy here, right? And we can see what's going on with this shape. Just like my previous video, you want to fix this corner here. Only two types of corners really that matter. So I'm going to use the cursor selector, deselect that, push it in that way. We're going to do the same thing for this one. And we're going to push it in this way. Now you want to try to avoid making any triangles or n-gons if possible. Select everything, press A, M, merge by distance. Okay. Now with any luck, this should subdivide fairly well. Okay. Maybe we want to take this corner here. Something you could do is you could press Control B and you could bevel it. All right, but after you bevel it, go to down here, expand the menu, change the shape to a 1, right? And change segments. You could do this while you bevel your mouse wheel up once, but change segments to 2. And that's going to hold a harder corner there. You can also try doing something like Control Shift and R, then pressing E. And you can try to bring in 2 edge loops like so. Okay. And now we have a shape that subdivides fairly well. Okay. Mix this up with different shapes. You'll find in times that there are shapes that are much more complicated. Just to give you an example, we're going to make one that's almost exactly the same. Actually, before we add that, let's bring it on up. Alt Z so I can select through it. I just want these edges here selected. Go ahead and bevel them one time, something like this. Maybe add a loop cut. Extrude this out and scale it down. Okay. For this here, maybe I want these to be flat, so I can use loop tools and flatten. Something like so. And loop tools and flatten. Now here's a trick. Even though I just flatten this, what ends up happening is this becomes uneven, and these angles wouldn't be the same as this angle, so it could look problematic and not very symmetrical, right? Machine Tools kind of helps you out on this because it's very easy to grab 2 faces, do Alt A and do a bottom align. That'll flatten that one. You could do a top align on this one, flattens that one. Now all we have to worry about is this section here. And it may be correct right now, or it may not be, and it's not. So what I would personally do is add a mirror modifier real quick. Okay, when you mirror something, it just puts two objects overlapping each other. You have to bisect it. Okay, and sometimes it'll be backwards, so it might end up doing this number. So you just have to click flip to make sure it does this. Then you can apply that mirror modifier by pressing Control A. Go in here. What I would personally do is just select this area, delete it, select the two edges, then press F. So you can end up with a shape like this. All right, now you can play around with this shape and make changes as you see fit. Let's select that whole loop, just pull it forward. So add some kind of variation to it. Slide things forward a little bit, or maybe a little bit backwards, flatten out an edge or a surface. All right, we're going to shade it smooth, and we'll see it's all like so. Press Control-3, we'll add the SubD modifier, turn it off in edit mode. Now we can go in and start doing some loop cuts and tightening everything up. And do this manually. It's actually quite good to, instead of using loop cuts or anything else, is to just simply use the knife tool and run around and see how it all starts to play together as you cut it up manually. So I'm going to connect these two by selecting them and pressing J. I'll do it on the back side as well. I do want to have this section hold an edge, and right now there's no good, easy way to do that other than adding these loop cuts like so. This is an interesting shape because it can be a little bit hard to have it behave in the manners that you want it to behave. I do recommend actually making this one and practicing on it. Because something right here like this, we would probably want an edge holding here. But the topology right now doesn't work that way. So turn off optimal display and you'll see that you can get a pretty wide variety of different topologies on something so simple. And something you could figure out on your own, like how you want to have this object behave perhaps. And it gets more interesting because right here, we'll see that it's shading incorrectly. It's not the way we want it to shade. This is one of those instances where you would want to use a different type of corner. So if I select this whole section here, I was to knock this out. Oh, not yet. I'm thinking the wrong thing here. It's this corner that we want. See that it only comes back to here and it kind of ends, so it doesn't really help a whole lot. We have to select all the way through, come down here and do the same thing, but we need a holding loop down here as well. All right, so now deselect here, deselect here, press G twice. If I push this up, this edge isn't going to be held like it just was. All right, so it can become problematic. Like I was saying, it's a very interesting shape for this reason. As you go through some of your process trying to make it behave in the ways you think it should, it probably won't. All right, so if I do that number, you'll see it created an error back here. Slid the wrong way. I'm going to use vertex snap for this one. I'm just going to snap it real quick, this area, just so it's kind of back in the right position. And I'm going to merge it all. Okay. So we still have some issues going on with this. Also, if you wanted to add loop cuts here in this area, they all shoot to the corner. And it becomes very dense there. That's not something you might want. You might want to try to route these through here and up over and back down and around, and then it's going to end up going all the way back around to this side. So this shape, it presents a lot more problems than you probably originally first thought of. You can see I accidentally welded that to way back there. Sometimes you got to pay attention to what's going on inside your model. Let's go ahead and delete that. All right, I'm going to connect this section to here. I can connect these two. Just select the edges and press F. And so that's going to go ahead and finish that up. So what would you do in this situation? How could you make it better? That's the big takeaway. We can see that this actually works, even though it only has two edges now. It works fairly well. It's not quite lined up anymore. The trick to that, I would probably reselect it. This won't be 100% accurate though. The loop tools flatten again. Just nudge it a little bit. Kind of help that little corner out. You can also try sliding this one either backwards or forwards. See what happens. That makes it pinch a little bit more in the corner, so sliding it backwards doesn't really help it much either. The actual solution to this is adding a extra cut in this direction. Okay, you'll see that it holds that edge in a little bit. You can also add an extra cut up here. That gives you a quad right at the end of this. So what it does is it makes it transition much nicer. Unfortunately, if this was a curved surface, that wouldn't work too well. Right? I'm going to go ahead and join these two sections. Dissolve that one. I want to join these two. Dissolve that one. You can also press Control X to do some quick dissolves. I'll push this one forward. All right, so we're kind of back where we were, and we'll see that right here. Now what it's doing is it's pulling this in, and it's creating a softer corner here, or edge, and it doesn't look right. Okay, and this one's pulling in over here, causing this weird flattening effect. All kinds of fun stuff, right? So there's a trick about this model, and it's kind of already naturally happened over here. So most people are aware that create a single plane. Well, this is a quad, right? The trick, though, is if you create that same plane and you rotate it 45 degrees, well, that's a quad too. The only difference is this one is like so, right? And so you have to be careful with that shape and look out for it. There's times you'll want to use it. It's another type of corner. Sometimes you can place it in flat areas as well, but it's kind of occurring right here. It's almost occurring. It's a little bit of a skewed quad. Why this is important is because it allows you to create redirection. Okay, you can create redirection so you can control the flow of things in some pretty wild ways. So I know back here, this isn't going to work, and a lot of this looks fine, but these caps are just not simply going to work. Okay. But everything in the middle, I think we have it about as good as it's going to get, maybe with the exception of this section here. Can add a simple loop cut and kind of reposition these polygons a little bit, and that might help. Or these edges, maybe not right here. Let's go ahead and deselect that one too. But if we move this one too much, it'll soften the corner as well, right? Keep that in mind. Add one down the middle. All right, but the back section here is the big deal. It's the one causing all the problems right now. So I'm going to delete it. Grab it, press F. And what I'm going to do instead is, once I fill it, I'm going to press I to inset and do this number. Here we can see we just created a pole here. So I'm actually doing this wrong. What I want is to also do it here. All right, so delete that face, press F. I do know this needs to be an edge, so I'm going to press J real quick to prove a point. That's what we're going to want here to separate the two shapes. You can see when I do a inset, it doesn't do it like I expect it to. So joining these, I now press inset, and if I turn on edge rail, we'll stay in that straight line there. Okay. Now we've pulled these all in. We can end this section right here by combining these two. Okay. And in these corners, since it's not working the way we want it to, we have sections on the wrong sides of areas. We're going to have to figure out a better solution. So we need one here. This is fine. This one can be dragged all the way down and then raised back up a tiny bit. Okay. Same with this top one. Pull it all the way up and drag it back down a tiny bit. Okay, so most of our issues come down to this back section and this front section, which I'm also going to quickly, we can just limit dissolve it instead of delete it, but let's go through it. All right. So this is a quad here. We need to connect these two. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we need to connect this to something, which we don't have anything to connect it to right now. But it's probably going to need to go down to this one, right? Problem here is if we bring it down and we trace this out. So for example, we know that we want it to connect to this one. So we're going to trace it out. Using the knife tool, we can tell that this kind of stuff's going to occur. We're going to run it through there, and we have that kind of skewed, almost diamond-like quad, right? This is what we're looking for because it's doing a redirection of the flow. And over here, we have to connect to this single point, but we have not too much we can actually connect to each other because there's only one here. There's this one here, this one here, this one here. So there's 3 points at the bottom. The one in the middle is already taken. So how do we connect? You know, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or not for that one, but 4 different points over to this section, right? It could be a little bit problematic. So, but we need to make quads as well. You're going to have to start balancing all this stuff in your head and start thinking about like, what can I do? What should I do? And unfortunately, in this situation, this shape, I'm going to bring these in, is probably one of the most challenging things that you didn't know would be so simple, right? So what's going on here is we need those diamond shapes. Because we want to do a redirection. I want this to redirect all the way up to here. Just like that. This one's fine. I want this one to go all the way up here. Shoot back into this one here. You see where that's going? So we can control this position here. All the way around. Join these. Join these. Join these. Join these. And join these. It's all quads now. And it looks like so. Okay. These redirections, if you check the flow on them, you'll see that creates a loop around this edge. That goes all the way around here. All the way around here. You'll see this play out over and over again. You got to do the same on the other side. Same process, except this one's a little bit easier to do. Do a quick inset. You need the holding edge, and then you work out the topology issue inside of the holding edge. That's pretty much what you're doing, right? So if you were to join this area, and then join this area, all the way through, you'll see we're turning those corners into quads, straighten them out, right? Now we have these sections that can combine, but we don't need to combine these two. We need to combine these and these. That's a quad, 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 quad. All over it's quads, right? And if we check the topology, you can see how it's behaving. And just like that, I think we got about as good as it can get. Might have to kind of look through it and make sure you got everything exactly the way you want it. These aren't hard edges, so I will bevel these. And then you see it won't hold that shape exactly, but it tries, and it does make it a hard edge. So just like that, we have done the best we can. Fortunately, there's not too many good solutions to try to add a lot more detail into this area. It does kind of have a little caveat to it, right? But by far, this is probably one of the better topologies you can get for this kind of shape. And trying to come up with a different result, you're going to find a lot of times you get weird kind of patterns in the backs, but you can get more detail in here by doing some other things. By maybe perhaps, let's do quad selections here. Something like this. All the way through. So you could try doing something like more or less an inset on rails. It might give you a little bit of temporary detail, but you can see where it starts to change. The directional flow is pretty apparent and the densities get pretty wild. So you can still take this section here, specifically for the back, and you try to just maybe push it out a little bit, edge slide it, G twice. You'll see here it might have an effect on this corner a little bit, but it's going to even out some of the polygons at least. And then last but not least, when you're closer to being done, you can fill in these areas a little bit as well. I think leaving that back would have probably been better because now these polygons are skewed, and I personally would rather have a little dense patch than a bunch of skewed ones. So something like this. You can see where that breaks down, right? The density is much more, much dramatically different compared to the rest of this model. You could make a sacrifice, maybe bevel here. Ooh, okay, let's not bevel that at all. I don't like that. Do 2 loop cuts, 3 loop cuts. We get real dense here, but at least we have something a little bit more dense over here now. All right. So this should hold its shape and look fairly well even at a low subdivision. And that's the practice exercise, all right, guys? So you can go through, play with different basic shapes, figure out how you need to lay out that topology, work it manually until it's the best it can be, all right? And once you get to that point, it'll start to all come together and make sense. I'm going to go ahead and save this as new shape 2 here. By make sense, I mean this. So Start with a basic shape, and before you know it, you're adding detail, and you're going to start creating things like this, and it's not going to even be a challenge at that point. Okay, it's just going to be about having fun. Same thing here for this demo. So demo file, a basic shape, starts turning into that. And then before you know it, you could toss a bunch of greebles and other things you've modeled onto it. And it looks a lot cooler than you probably realize that how easy it starts and how much, what the end results can look like anyways, how good they could look. So keep that in mind. That's going to be in the next video. We're going to talk about the iteration process here and how to go through it. All right. Take care. I'll check you out the next one.